Rain.
And I'm Katie.
And together we're Wicked Rain Studio.
So today we're going to talk about 3D silicone molds, which is a mold of something that doesn't have a flat back like our necklaces do.
We have made quite a few of the flat silicone mold method where the item is maybe half an inch tall at its height.
Yeah.
Maybe, or lower than that. But we're hoping to branch out into making figurines.
Yep.
And those are quite a bit taller. 3D silicone mold making is often used in cosplay as well. If you're making like a staff with like, I don't know, a crow on top, for example.
Yep. And so there's two different ways to do 3D molds. We're going to be doing one of the methods today. There's the method we're going to be using today is where you have a 3D object that you basically glue to the bottom of a cup and pour the silicone in on top of it. So where you'll be pouring your resin in is the bottom of the item. This is really good for like figurines and things. Another method which can be used for, I've seen like cosplay spear tips or things that don't necessarily have a flat bottom, is done as a two-part silicone mold where you mold half of it, then the other half. We're gonna do that at a later date.
Yeah, that'll be a future experiment for us to try. So a few things we're gonna need is the silicone. We use Smooth On. We also absolutely have to use a vacuum chamber for this.
Yeah, because bubbles show up and it really doesn't matter how good you are at pouring. I know a lot of people say that you can do it without the vacuum chamber, but we're just not that.
For flatter items, it's possible to get a good mold without the vacuum chamber, but for something that is three-dimensional...
And ours is really detailed. There's a lot of little nooks and crannies.
It's just, I can't imagine how you would get it looking perfect without a vacuum chamber.
Yeah.
We also need a cup.
Yep.
And some tape.
You're gonna need a cup and some tape.
And some hot glue.
Yep.
And last but certainly not least, we need the sculpt we're making the mold of. This little dragon cutie was sculpted by Katie out of polymer clay. Starting with a container for us to put the mold inside. In this case, we're using a cut up plastic cup, a little bit of tape on the bottom, and hot gluing the edge. The silicone we're using for this mold is Smooth On's Mold Star 30. It's a two-part silicone with a ratio of 1:1 by volume. This means we'll pour part A into one cup up to a line, and then match that in the second cup with part B. Then we need to mix the two parts together. I like to take the part that is more liquidy and pour it into the thicker part. This just makes sure that you get all of the stuff from the bottom of the first cup into the second. Then thoroughly mix both parts together. Don't be afraid to create bubbles in this while you're mixing because we're going to use a vacuum chamber to degas. Place the cup of mixed silicone into the vacuum chamber. Depressurize the chamber until your gauge reads 25 to 30. The vacuum chamber will cause the silicone to appear to boil as it pulls the bubbles up from the inside. This will also cause the silicone to rise up in the cup. Keep the cup in the vacuum chamber until the bubbles have started to slow down. This is usually about 1 to 2 minutes. The final bubbles will not pop until you have released the pressure on the vacuum chamber. The silicone is very smooth after this degassing. Pour your silicone in around your original item. It is best to pour into the deepest part, allowing the silicone to grow up around the item. You'll notice in this step that I only mixed enough silicone to cover 3/4 of our dragon. This was the maximum volume of silicone I could comfortably mix in our cups. Since silicone will bond to itself, it's okay to do this in multiple rounds. Now put the mold back into the vacuum chamber. Follow the same steps as before, keeping the mold in the chamber until the bubbles have slowed down. This removes all the air that has been trapped as we poured the silicone over our dragon. Mix more silicone to fill up the rest of the cup, following all the same steps. It's best to have the silicone at least 1/4 of an inch thick above the highest point of your original. At this point in filming, our camera card was full. Oops. But the steps are the same here. Degas the mold in the vacuum chamber until the bubbles are slow, then remove the mold and set aside until the silicone is fully set. This particular kind of silicone has a 6-hour set time. Once the silicone is set, remove the tape from the bottom and tear apart the cup to extract the mold. Pick a side to cut down and draw your cut line. A zigzag cut will ensure that your mold stays aligned when using it. Our figurine will have a flat bottom. The silicone has wrapped around this original to create a rounded edge. This is not a look we need, so to make casting easier, we are cutting away the silicone. We need to continue cutting the zigzag line in order to extract the dragon, but it's hard to hold the mold open and cut at the same time. Having a friend to help is very nice at this point. The less you have to cut open the mold, the cleaner the final cast. So we keep testing the ability to remove the sculpt before cutting further down. Eventually we determined that this sculpt needs the entire side cut down as well as a little towards the bottom. The clay is fragile, so usually some part of the original sculpt is destroyed during removal.
My bald baby.
This means we have to extract all of the pieces left behind. Now we can pour resin to test our new mold. Use rubber bands to keep the mold tightly closed. The first time we use a mold, we like to pour water into it to determine the volume of resin we will need. We will use a 2-part resin, like our silicone earlier, so we will have that volume for part A and part B. Pour one part into the other and mix well. We use a pressure pot to prevent resin bubbles, but it's still best to try to avoid creating too many when mixing. We're coloring this resin with mica powder and the very precise measuring method of a small amount. Pour the resin into the mold. Try to make sure you get the resin into all the little nooks. Now it's time to demold our first dragon. This is definitely a 2-person job. Be careful not to tear your mold when extracting the resin figurine. Wiggle the mold a bit to release the seal, then open up and remove the resin figurine. Remember how I said that we used water to determine the volume of our mold? Well, apparently we left a little bit of water in it before pouring our resin. This figurine came out with damp horns that are not quite full length. Here we have a little cutie that managed to get all of his horns fully filled with resin. Much better. We still need to do a little cleanup around the edges, and then he'll need to be painted. Don't move. Oh. Thanks for watching our video on 3D mold making.
And be sure to like and subscribe and check out our next video on resin dye.
If you haven't yet, you can watch our previous video on different types of silicone for mold making. It's somewhere around here.
I don't know. We're never going to figure this out.